Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, April 8th. I had a bit of an emergency today, so I'm starting extremely late, so let's just hop into everything here. The 60 million downloads appreciation is almost complete now with day 7 of 8 for me. And I don't really think I have enough gems at this point to get fancy with buying extra cards. Not that the extra cards ever seem like they make it into a deck for me either, so yeah. Just don't really have a lot of extra time to ever jump back and play Yu-Gi-Oh! Inherently, without giving away too much personal data, I spent a lot of times today. Wow, looks like we have quite a few of extra things. No, we really don't. We just have one of this, Blazing Arena packs, and then 66 of this. I spent a lot of time today sitting around, but also just not really in the situation or in the mood to pull out my Steam Deck, even though I had my Steam Deck with me, and start playing a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Again, because it was more of an emergency situation where a more scheduled downtime situation would have worked with the Steam Deck better. As for the Steam Deck, I spent most of the weekend not really doing much of anything, kind of trying to just take the weekend off, but I did put in a lot of work on working on one of the programs that I would really like to see Steam Deck have to uninstall games and apps and then leave an icon to reinstall them when you feel like you're going to use them later. Now, inherently, even on an NVMe, if you on a weekly or daily basis are just uninstalling and reinstalling things, that's just going to wear down your SSD quite a bit. And I missed this. This was a short experience. What happened there? Like, it started on the 3rd and it ended on the 7th, and somehow in that whole activity I didn't even make it to 3 wins. What the heck happened there? Yeah, well, obviously my schedule's been a mess and I really haven't been streaming or playing that much Yu-Gi-Oh! But also I just think I probably didn't see it that early. It definitely didn't feel like there was 4 days there that I was playing, but wait a minute, if it started like on Thursday, then I would have really only seen it on Friday, and then it would have been over the weekend. Yeah, and if Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to start doing that, where it's effectively Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday events, I'm going to just not play on Saturday and Sunday. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I've been working on that code over the weekend and made a decent amount of progress, but also spent a lot of time just learning. It definitely was more of a learning experience than just default you getting it right on the head. KDE, which is what the desktop mode of Steam OS is built on, in fact KDE 5 would be what I describe it as built on, has ways to turn what is normally just a text-based terminal script called a bash script or a .sh file, although in fairness you can use other command lines other than bash. You can use sh, you can use ash, ash, you can use bash. Born again shell is what bash stands for. But not every BSD Linux. Well, I mean, not BSD is not Linux, so not every single BSD and off branch of something from Unix supports bash. Although pretty much every Linux does. But yeah, these scripts are mostly text-based, and you can use KDialog to put up some prompts and make it graphical and make it a little bit fancier. I spent too much time trying to work around that to, in the end, really just realize that the interactiveness of running shell commands in most cases really benefit more from just opening up a terminal window and doing it text-based wise. Because in particular, I was trying to do the sudo command, which is to temporarily elevate a user to become a root user and install applications in Steam Deck where you don't have a root command even established to begin with. I was trying to make a nice graphical interface for that, and it just wasn't going to really work. And even doing that is actually an insecure way of doing it, because other applications can monitor what is called the standard in, which one command, which would have been KDialog, would have used to send the password to the sudo command. So I spent a lot of time around that thought, and that definitely turned out to be wasteful. I spent a lot of time messing with regular expressions to extract text, and I thought it wasn't working, and then in the long run I actually realized it had been working the whole time, and I was just being an idiot because I commented out all the actions. So it looked like it was working on the 3 lines that it found in a row before it was doing any of the other actions it was supposed to do, but in reality it was doing it exactly how I expected it to do, which is to work on the first line, then work on the second line, then work on the third line. Let's see, the question here is, can we get high enough to accomplish what we want, which is a 1-turn kill? It's also storming right now. It's starting to storm, so there is definitely a possibility that I'll have some other technical issues. Is that enough to win? I think that is. Let's see how this goes. See, there's a special reward for doing 8,000 damage in one hit. And even though I do have a pretty good winning deck here, it never gets really that crazy. 4,800, 5,300 is about as high as I can ever get with my strategies. That being said, even though I abandoned using KDialog for the text commands, which are going to require more of an interactive shell and user input to just respond back with yes or no, I am still going to use it at the very beginning because the script can either be called where it can check to see if it has any arguments. That would be you call a command and then there would be text after that to say here's an option, here's a file name. You can run that to see if there's a file name or multiple file names, but then you can also run it potentially with no file names. And so if there are no file names, I can use KDialog, which makes all kinds of different windows, as a file picker window to say here you need to go find a bunch of .desktop files, which is what it works on, and select them. And so you can still get some prettiness there. Suffice it to say, I don't think I want to spend even 5 more minutes talking about the script though, because in the moment it's close to being working, but that inherently doesn't mean it's actually going to take a short amount of time to get it working, and it's just also nerdy. Shell scripting can be very powerful and very helpful, but also it is just yet another programming language, although shell scripting in particular is perhaps extra powerful in that it is running other programs and programming languages, other programs, which otherwise, if you were making a C++ program or a Python program, you're going to have to at least install some extra libraries and jump through some extra hoops to execute other programs. There's just a higher level of expectation of security there. It would be very easy to make a script that would just absolutely destroy your computer, or my Steam Deck in this case. Although the Steam Deck is immutable, so it would be kind of difficult to create major damage. Otherwise, on the Steam Deck, I had another thought that is early, certainly, but I have this experimental thought that perhaps kids today should be taught to use stenography on on-screen keyboards, and the Steam Deck is probably a great example of one device that could actually make that happen. As far as physical keyboards that are stenographic keyboards, there's OpenSteno that helps you build your own stenography keyboards, or lets you buy very specialized keyboards that can read multiple button presses being pressed down at the same time, which is necessary for stenography. This also highlights that you need a touchscreen that can read multiple button presses being pressed at the same time, and I'm pretty sure that the Steam Deck can at least read 4 inputs at the same time. It might not consistently read that, and then there definitely have been some apps that seem like they get stuck on occasion. I've also noticed that when I was using KDialog to make a whole bunch of windows, like pop-up windows, eventually you would see KWin, part of the operating system, just run out of space. It has like a hard-coded maximum number of windows, and I wonder if that's me causing a problem, or if this isn't an actual issue where, particularly if you open the Steam keyboard over and over again, will it eventually just mess up? Yeah, I'm not sure. More experimentation is going to be needed there. because I could definitely see it being very commonplace to just open the keyboard again and again and again in a session, and very weird that it would potentially break. I also played around with KDE Connect. Now this was an app that is by default just built into Steam OS and the KDE desktop environment on top of Arch Linux, and I thought I wasn't going to use that. I thought I was going to instead use local share, which actually takes up more space since you already have one app is installed by default, and so if you can use that one app, you should use that one app. But yeah, KDE Connect is almost too good for an app, because it's not just sending files between your phone and your Steam Deck. It is straight up letting you do so many things that you would like to do that I would have liked to seen other apps do before I looked at KDE Connect. I really should have just tried it first. See if we can get around this. If I can't get Zeus in this turn, I pretty much lost. So if he can counter and destroy a card, which it seems like it can, you know what, let's just activate this then. See what happens there. But yeah, KDE Connect has the ability to send keyboard and mouse signals from your cell phone to your Steam Deck, from your Steam Deck to your cell phone. There is a KDE Connect for Windows PC also, so you could use it from a laptop. You can send files, you can control most modern music playbacks. Beyond Pod, the old version I'm using, I'm just going to end the turn here, I've lost, doesn't seem like it fully can be paused and played back, which is not super surprising since I'm using like a 6 or 7 year old version of Beyond Pod before somebody else bought it out and ruined it. Yeah, let me just see what all the options are, because it is quite a bit of exactly what you would want. Nope, don't listen to other people's stolen radio broadcasts from many years ago of Ron and Fez. Yeah. I can't see any of it. I'd have to turn my Steam Deck on. Let's see. But yeah, as far as plugins go, I can see that KDE Connect has these built-in plugins, and they're almost certainly going to add more and more, where you can get your battery reported on the Steam Deck from your cell phone. You can get a big screen remote. You can copy the clipboard over, which that is going to be super helpful. You can get a connectivity report as far as network signal strength and status. You can synchronize your contacts. You can move files over. You can find your phone. You can find your Steam Deck. Media player controller, mouse receiver, multimedia controllers. Provide a remote control for your media player. Control your phone's media players. So there's a lot of plugins that go one way and a lot of plugins that go the other way. And ping. I'm not sure what the ping really is. You can receive notifications one way or the other. You can use it as a mouse or keyboard one way or the other. You can send SMSs from your Steam Deck. You can share and receive URLs on top of files and browse their file system. There's a slideshow remote. there's incoming call notifications and volume. So just a ton of stuff, which KDE Connect does a really bad job of just explaining that in its welcome screen. It really, to me, looked like it was just going to be an app to file share between the two. But no, it's got a lot more going for it than that, and eliminates potentially a dozen different applications you might have on your cell phone or your Steam Deck to emulate the same thing. One problem though, and this is kind of an issue overall with the Steam Deck, is that in February they came out with KDE Plasma desktop version 6. So just a year long in development, major upgrade. And yeah, it'll probably be somewhat delayed before we get to a SteamOS version 3.1, or more likely, I would guess, they're going to just straight up jump to a SteamOS version 4. And it'll be interesting to see when that happens and how much else is just going to be improved as far as SteamOS. There is a possibility that it might be slow to progress to a SteamOS that uses KDE Plasma 6. Because they are moving over from the X11 windowing system to the Wayland windowing system, so it'll just be kind of a question about whether anything is still using the extremely old X11 window compositing code, or if they've moved to the much newer Wayland code on everything. In particular, the compatibility layers on Proton to make Windows programs look correct and play correct on SteamOS, which is going to obviously have to be their main focus. So the hope there would be that they wouldn't completely change the operating system to avoid KDE Plasma 6. With KDE Plasma 6, there's improvements, stability improvements, and just speed improvements, which are interesting to start with. But there is also a new version of KDE Connect which fixes the one major problem with KDE Connect right now, which is the app just will not connect via Bluetooth. It's in development, it's available on the new version of KDE Plasma 6 called Neon, codename Neon. But yeah, without that Bluetooth connectivity, you have this weird situation where the best case scenario to use your Steam Deck, and it still may always be the best case scenario to use your Steam Deck, would be to have a cell phone in your pocket, either connect to a Wi-Fi connection, and then have a mobile data limit of 0 as a hotspot, or have tethering and unlimited data and turn off that mobile data limit of 0 on a Wi-Fi hotspot. Either way, at the moment, the move is have your cell phone connect to a Wi-Fi connection, then have your Wi-Fi connection be hotspotted from your cell phone to your Steam Deck. This is all just so KDE Connect works, because unlike cell phones, it does seem like, at least in the programming level, there is not a double antenna signal that you can get on the Steam Deck. Which that feels like that is probably not true on the hardware level. At least it feels like it shouldn't be true on the hardware level. It would make a lot of sense that if Steam Decks got cheaper, that there would be scenarios where multiple people, 2-3 people, would be in the same area and would want to just connect to each other and play with each other without actually being online. Now Steam really wants everybody to be online, certainly, but it is kind of crazy that there isn't a scenario where you could have a LAN party equivalent with wireless connectivity, or have a lot of more possibilities with edge cases where the Steam Deck would want to potentially have its own Wi-Fi hotspot mode, or peer-to-peer mode, ad hoc mode. I think it's called ad hoc mode, but yeah, doesn't seem like there's any real setup for that. Unfortunately, I could not, and I don't see any evidence on the internet that anybody has succeeded in using Bluetooth to be a parallel, personal area network, and then use your Bluetooth to be a hotspot, which would be more ideal. It would be slower connection speeds, but for KDE Connect reasons, it makes a lot more sense that you would just always be Bluetooth connected to your cell phone and not trying to Wi-Fi hotspot your cell phone. And even though the Wi-Fi connections probably are going to be faster than Bluetooth, but I could not get it to work. And even on the Wi-Fi hotspot, to get KDE Connect to work, you have to effectively manually type in the IP address. Yeah. Well, you not effectively, you literally have to type in the IP address. And you have to have a consistent IP address, which usually isn't a problem because most Wi-Fi hotspots on a cell phone are going to assign IP addresses using a consistent algorithm based on the MAC address, and so as long as your Steam Deck's MAC address isn't changing, it's probably going to get the same IP address again. You could certainly go into the networking settings of a Steam Deck and say, I am going to demand this single hand-coded manual IP address to solve that too. But I think, weirdly, some of the most and biggest advantages of KDE Connect as an application is probably to install it on Windows. And yeah, I really have to unsing the praises of Local Share, for Local Share really does not do anything anywhere near as much as KDE Connect does, and I was able to transfer a 5 gigabyte Windows install ISO from my cell phone to my Steam Deck without any problems at all on using KDE Connect. When I tried the same move, it failed miserably with Local Share. Weirdly, I think that probably also highlights that even if you don't have a Linux operating system at all, if you don't have a Steam Deck or any other Linux operating system, between Android and iPhones and Windows and I think Mac OS too, your best idea is still probably to install KDE Connect to move files around. So yeah, I was surprisingly positively surprised about KDE Connect. And then for the rest of the warm-up section today, I've been playing this mobile games that I got for free, Legacy 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are your kind of standard garbage puzzle games. You'll wander around, you'll see a bunch of very much bespoke different puzzles, and you'll solve things, and then you'll be done in a couple hours, which honestly you should probably be done somewhat quicker than that, but the puzzles in Legacy are not not really greatly designed or good. Like, it runs into a lot of moon logic problems, which, who's gonna win here with the cancel versus the cancel versus the cancel? I guess he is. Let's see how that all resolves. That's an 8 chain there. That's pretty long. Yeah, moon logic is the idea that the puzzles just really don't make any sense to anybody other than the original creator of the game, and there's a lot of wandering back to places where you're easily going to forget where you saw something last, or if you've seen something at all before, and that creates a more negative experience where where you're just frustrated. Alright, I'm gonna just battle here. Probably should have just battled before. So yeah, you see somebody's clicking the reaction button on the live stream. Thank you for that, I suppose. Yeah, having played all of the first 3 Legacy games, they are just like confusing. It was probably about halfway through the second game that I started to just heavily use hints on them, and ironically, or maybe this is the scam, the Legacy games with their difficult puzzles that you're gonna get like one clue if you see it twice now in the 3 games I've played, 3.5 games I've played so far. I've just not seen the hint on the screen. It's just mixed in with the background too well. But yeah, if you can't get the first 3 text clues, it'll just say let me show you, and it will take it to his personal YouTube channel, which is ad enabled, and so you're watching ads to get the clue to solve the puzzle. So I wonder if maybe there is just a scheme here where people are making very much asset flippy simple puzzle games on mobile in particular, giving them away for free, sometimes selling them most of the time, and then getting ad revenue from the commercials on YouTube as an extra source of income. Weirdly, the hints are also somebody playing on PC. It's not even somebody playing with the mobile version, so you see a mouse cursor moving around a lot of times. And that's not really something that's exclusive to just the Legacy game. There's a lot of point and click puzzle games out there that all feel exactly the same. Legacy 1 if you'd never played any other point and click puzzle game, would have felt unique enough, but as soon as you started playing Legacy 2, you would have very quickly realized that these same gimmicks, the same puzzles, have just been slightly modified for the second game. What's weird about Legacy in particular is that the creator of the game refers to himself as Dave, just D-A-V-E, no last name, which for a product you're selling, you either need to put out your real name or you need to hide behind the anonymity of a LLC corporate name, a company name. You can't just go by your first name like there's only one Dave in the universe. If there is going to be only one Dave in the universe, it's going to be David Lister from Red Dwarf, in my mind, and I know that fictional character didn't make the game. Here we have Disco Dave on the chat saying, yes sir, reacting to me, noticing that he was hitting all the reaction buttons. Think I've lost here. So yeah, I really can't recommend the Legacy games. I'm still trying to play Memento Mori on my cell phone more legitimately for the long term, and somewhat struggling to get the dailies done for the 2 different accounts I've made on that. And I'm still playing the adult game Tinka Fuma, which is still going pretty well, and the dailies on that are somewhat easier. It just takes less time. Since both games are idle games and that you really aren't pressing any buttons and you can just go in auto mode, although Memento Mori is mandatory auto mode. There is no non-auto mode. It really is just a comparison between how long does it take to click all the buttons to start up each fight, and Tinka Fuma is quicker by far than Memento Mori is, and the fights take longer. Even if you skip them, they take longer. Alright, so since I started late, let's just start covering the big news I'm interested in. So I've been following this family gaming database on Twitter, which it's kind of crazy I'm still on Twitter, but also I don't have a better system really to get completely off of Twitter. And one of the things that they have here 4 hours ago is this game called Beyond Eyes from Team 17, of them getting around to catching up to reviewing games, which this definitely highlights that they are very, very much far behind where they should be. And that's going to be true for any kind of website that's going to go back and try and play any game or make a database around any games. But yeah, this is a 6 or 7 year old game. I covered it on my channel. It's a game about a blind girl who uses her other senses to visualize the world around her. It's an interesting concept in the abstract. The actual implementation around it is somewhat lackluster. In part because her blindness, for the most part, doesn't act as any real hindrance to the player. And when you walk near something after the first couple of examples, you pretty much just get a 3D visualization of what that thing is. In the early examples, there's some cases where it seems like she's hearing one thing, which is like a babbling brook, and then it turns out to be like a broken sewage pipe or something like that. But the story kind of just doesn't kind of go anywhere, or have much of a narrative. I don't think the character ever really speaks, or doesn't say much. And it definitely felt like at the end it just kind of petered out, and that at least in one point, if I vaguely recall, just wandering around trying to find that one last square inch of objects I was supposed to reveal by walking around. It's perhaps a unpleasant story of some sorts, in that you are effectively just a lost little girl who happens to also be blind, and you're struggling through that. I think most of the story is her chasing after this cat, and the cat just wandering around. But the bigger story here is, while Family Gaming Database is clearly working through a backlog of reviewing games for their target demographic, which I don't know if their target demographic is being served particularly well. And mostly I wonder if it isn't just them promoting their own book. But yeah, I don't know if you're being served particularly well there by getting reviews for very, very old games. When, in contrast, I'm not really seeing them review brand new games. There's a ton of brand new games coming out all the time, and obviously they are selecting things that are mainstream enough that people would know about them. Team 17 as a developers, not some crazy indie Steam Direct creator. Weirdly, Beyond Eyes, being a game about playing as a blind girl, is 100% dependent on you actually being excited to play it. It feels like, at least. I didn't close my eyes trying to play the game. But yeah, that doesn't. And it didn't really inspire any major extra empathy in me when playing it. Mostly it just frustrated me. There is going to be a point, almost certainly, where we'll start to get audio novels as video games instead of visual novels. It will become very easy to try and sell games with the capability, at least, of being played if you're blind. And then just using text-to-speech. I mean, almost certainly we'll see a game at some point where it's AI-generated script writing for a visual novel, AI-generated images that don't really matter for a visual novel, and then it's also going to sell itself as being a accessible game by being audio novel compatible, in that you don't actually have to read the screen to play. Which, in fairness, you could probably convert a lot of the really, really good and well-known visual novels to be audio novels, and license derivative products that way. Although most visual novels are from Japan, and the Japanese have not been the most accommodating to disabled people. They just don't see that many of them, so it's not as big of a deal to them. Yeah, the disabled have traditionally been hidden away in Japanese society. Anyone who was different was often shunned and hidden away in Japanese society. There's been some progress there, certainly, but it has been in the past attitudes like that. The other thing I would point out here is that while the Family Gaming Database's tweets say there's a review, they really aren't getting into any real details. And it doesn't seem like they have that big of a focus there, where it feels like the tweet should say E for everyone, emotional intelligence, empathy, and it's under 5 hours as far as a skill level, which that's an interesting skill level requirements here, because yeah, there are some disabled people undoubtedly that don't have high levels of emotional intelligence or empathy. I'm not sure they diagnosed too many kids with narcissist personality disorder early, because arguably you might diagnose almost any 2-year-old as being having narcissistic personality disorder if you started going down that path. Then they have a note here of trauma. But yeah, a lot of what's being said here is not being said in the tweet, so it really is just pushing them towards that. And the entire description is really just this, which this may literally be coming directly from the Steam description. And yeah, even they admit that they first checked it out 3 years ago, and then it was re-examined and updated 7 days ago, so I'm not sure what the re-examination really needs to be. Maybe they're making their own YouTube channel, which maybe that is what's going on here, is that they're making their own YouTube channel and trying to get views. Doesn't look like it. If anything, this looks like this may just be a trailer. But yeah, this is what the game looks like. She's blind. She sees you see as a player a wall of nothing. As you get closer, the world fills in. Although in this early section, this is basically the beginning of the game, you get some falsities here. Right, here's a bird chirping, and so she hears that, and you see it for a second, which that wasn't a falsity, but eventually you do get to a point where there is just a sound effect of one thing that you think it's one thing, and then it turns into another thing. A game like this probably would be better if it was multiple characters with multiple disabilities. Yeah. And what's weird about this is that you just really I don't think you'd ever let a young blind girl wander around on her own without looking after her. You'd have some kind of caregiver pretty quickly. Well, you would have at least a dog that is likely to try and protect you instead of a cat, which is likely to just wander around and hunt. But yeah, multiple disabilities might have been a way to go to try and tell multiple stories. There is also a possibility here where you could have her hearing things and then her hallucinating / misidentifying things, where she hears a sound and she interprets it one way. Although the fact that you're just seeing it animated, in particular, one way, still just doesn't really make a lot of sense that someone who is blind, who's maybe never seen these things before, would have in their mind an accurate depiction of what it looks like. The graphics were pretty rough in this game, and I can't help but feel like that there wasn't enough budget in Blind Eyes or Beyond Eyes. You never really go Beyond Eyes. It's another great example of a game that doesn't really live up to its title. I didn't play there, so I auto-surrendered. Wait, when I shouldn't have. Let's see. As far as daily quests go, I should play one more time, but I'm not even sure I'm going to bother today, since we already started late. Yep. I don't know if I have anything more to say about Beyond Eyes. I wanted to talk about this. There's this Reddit post where they are saying that this is a legitimate photo of Gabe Newell, the founder of Valve, but let's be realistic here, kind of just a major shareholder of Valve at this point and increasingly becoming a silent partner. Now, last time I saw him live on an actual broadcast, Gabe Newell was significantly overweight. He's always been fairly overweight, and he was struggling to breathe as he was talking, and yeah, he did not sound good at all. That was perhaps slightly before the COVID pandemic, or maybe at the very early part of it. He's been locked down in New Zealand during the COVID pandemic, and he liked that quite a bit, to the point where he even hinted that he wanted to move all of Valve to New Zealand, and that doesn't seem like that's really gone anywhere. Which, yeah, that really wouldn't work too much. He could move some people to New Zealand and make a new office if he wants to work out of that office, but he's not going to get everybody in Valve at Richmond, Washington to move over to New Zealand. And yeah, that's not realistic. Although that might be a great way for Valve to fire and lay off a bunch of people without actually firing or laying off people, is just to close down one office and move to a different part of the world. So anyways, I'm hoping this is real. If it is, this is the best Gabe Newell has looked in a long time. It's very possible, and Reddit is speculating that he was on one of the newer drugs like Ozempic that are really, really effective on weight loss. I wouldn't be surprised, since Ozempic is for people with diabetes, I wouldn't be surprised if Gabe Newell did have diabetes, and so he may very well be a legitimate user of Ozempic compared to Hollywood celebrities who are 90 pounds using Ozempic, which it doesn't really work that way. If you lose that much weight and you're already underweight, it's going to make you unhealthy, not healthier. That being said, yeah, if this is real, he looks pretty good. He is still fairly old, and but I keep saying if this is real because I just don't know if this is real, or if this isn't just somebody took Gabe Newell's face and AI generated a face on a fake body. Somebody took somebody else's body and cut and pasted. You could certainly do that. You could get around the head and neckline and just attach it that way manually and Photoshop it. But yeah, I hope it's true. Now, that being said, that you look at this background that's all blurred out, and I'm not sure I believe that this would be some kind of Valve laboratory where Gabe Newell might be working, or some kind of laboratory in general. Because over here looks like some kind of press. Over here you've got an oven. This looks more like a cell phone repair shop. But maybe they're working on Steam Decks there. Noticeably, I'm not seeing anything that screams Valve in the background here. And it's all being blurred out. You would think you would see something that would be like a blurry Steam Deck or a VR headset. Although maybe Gabe Newell actually isn't really doing or even working out of Valve areas. But yeah, the problem here is that this is r/Steam on Reddit, and as far as I know, no mainstream video game journalist has reached out to confirm if this picture is real or not. And all it is the title and the picture, whereas let me make sure that wasn't just a brickroll. Okay, so the source here seems to be from the Starfish. Well, what is this? This company called Starfish. Is this some kind of new company of his? It must have been. Or this is a really well thought out idea. So Starfish Research Center apparently might be a new side project that Gabe Newell's working on, or this is all been faked. Seems like all the photos were taken in the exact same spot. Now, one thing I've criticized video game companies in the long run for a long time now is that they just don't do a really good job of getting professional looking photos of their employees, and so this looks really good to just have everybody looking fairly interesting. This is a neuro engineer, so they're working, if this is a real thing and not just a fake website to back up a fake image, and this isn't just a long con, sounds like they might be working on a brain to human chip like Elon Musk's company made or is working on. Focused on delivering real benefits to real people by building the next generation of neural interfaces. Our job is to figure out what's best and most important thing to be doing is, and then do it. They're in Bellevue, Washington, so he is not apparently in New Zealand anymore. Yeah, and it's definitely, if any of this is real, again, this is why you need mainstream journalists in the real world. You need somebody who has the extra time to do the research and figure out if any of this can be verified. Can you reach out to this company? Like, can you reach out to Gabe Newell and contact him and talk to him on the phone so you know this is real? But also, I think this also highlights that the focus isn't 100% Steam as far as Gabe Newell's concerned, which is fine, because that just doesn't. I don't think he's really had an active hand in Valve, and I think Valve is more run by a secret cabal of shareholders. So probably you could figure out who they are and who's in charge. But yeah, their quote-unquote flat infrastructure, which Starfish also claimed to have a flat infrastructure, eventually just leads to people having power without it actually being expressed in the rules that people have power. And creates the problems that we've heard about at Valve, where people don't really know who their boss is or who they're really reporting to. Activision is still under Microsoft's new ownership, happy to announce that it is banning people from their game. Activision says it banned 27,000 Call of Duty accounts over the weekend, which, yeah. It's not really much of a brag, or a brag in general, to say, hey, we're banning a bunch of people from our game. It either admits that there was 27,000 cheaters, or that there's some mixture of there being 27,000 cheaters and you being and Activision being overzealous to ban people for other reasons. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com says Konami is going to raise the base salary in Japan for the third consecutive year. Quote here is, "We intend to continue to generate innovation driven by our diverse human resources," which a Japanese company claiming they have diverse human resources probably means something extremely different than what it would mean anywhere else in the world. The level of diversity in Japan is going to be, maybe you have like 1 or 2 foreign workers, and then you have some people that are maybe from like Osaka or the north part of Japan, and some people from the south part of Japan, and then a whole bunch of people from the Tokyo central part of Japan. Like that's about as much diversity as Japan's really going to have. I suspect really this is more of a case where they are just consistently having to raise the base price pay because they were considerably underpaying people. An extra $32 a month or $395 per year is not a significant increase in Japan. I can certainly guarantee that. And I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't really a case of them just having to raise the price because they're struggling to hire anybody. Although I also wouldn't be surprised if there's just a lot of people that aren't super happy in Japan with Konami, and so they just don't want to work for them, period. They also are planning to move to Osaka, to relocate and expand its Osaka studio. Maybe not move completely to Osaka. That may not be very helpful or actionable information for most people. It really has nothing to do with the gamers with whether Konami is actually ever going to make another game that would be good, or another game that isn't just going to be a remake or re-release of things they've already made. So apparently Dominic Law, which is the CEO of Neopets, has a grand ambitions to revitalize and grow the beloved 2000 web game Neopets. It'll be interesting to see if that happens, although inherently, if you made a game that was super successful like Neopets back in the day and it's fallen out of being successful, it definitely is extremely tempting and probably the right move to try and bring it back and revitalize it. I never really did anything with Neopets, and I don't know enough about it to really make any commentary, but I would imagine that you're going to have to modernize and add a lot of features and abilities and content and just remaster the visuals around Neopets for a modern era, and it still might not work because Neopets may very well just not work for what modern gamers are looking for. It is a little crazy that something like Neopets doesn't already have a mobile game, and that it wasn't very early to have some kind of cell phone game that you would play forever. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says that still in Embracer's custody, which is a funny way of phrasing that, Gearbox Publisher has rebranded to Arc Games. it is a little surprising that Embracer didn't sell off Gearbox Publishing to Take-Two, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Take-Two didn't want Gearbox Publishing. Gearbox Publishing in particular has not really done too many games that they've published in the past, and I don't think they've done a particularly good job of publishing the games that they've published in the past. And that's true for a lot of the newer startup publishing companies, is that they just don't have the connections and they don't have the skill. Although maybe Gearbox Publishing is better at publishing than Embracer alone was, so they may have some value to Embracer, whereas 2K and Take-Two have their own publishing divisions and they already have people who can handle that. We Happy Few is one of the examples of games that was published by Gearbox Publishing, and there was major mistakes in how that was advertised and promoted, and how they didn't correct the momentum of people expecting We Happy Few to be a narrative single-player adventure game, and then realizing that once you start to play it, that it is more of a resource random rogue game, a survival game. Gearbox Publishing previously had agreed to publish Hyper Light Breaker, and is involved with Star Trek Online and Remnant series. So they had some established relationships. It also might be a case here that where Embracer can see making more profit, or at least wanting to lock in the profits of the games that they've already got under contract with Gearbox Publishing, now called Arc Games, and that they didn't want to lose the potential profit there by selling that part. Inherently though, even when Gearbox Publishing was formed several years ago, it always felt like you're just making a new company and putting Gearbox in front of it. That's how all of Gearbox felt like. It's Gearbox Montreal, Gearbox Quebec, Gearbox Publishing. It felt like Randy Pitchford was very much just making other companies inside of one company that had already seen a level of success, and not really trying to make one major company that would work with it within itself particularly well. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle, being a UK-based website, says that the UK retailer Game is reportedly making layoffs. Most of the staff are being moved to 0-hour contracts, which that sounds like not a contract at that point. It's being claimed. Which, yeah. You don't want hourly employees with no contracts or guaranteed income. That is the way of late stage capitalism, in my opinion. Although, if you get universal basic income, you can certainly drop a lot of arguments for a lot of other things, particularly if you get a universal basic income that actually is a living wage, which those two concepts are going to have to really be combined if it was ever going to work. It doesn't really help if you get a UBI of $10 a month and then there's a massive wave of people being laid off as automation increasingly reduces the number of people needing the work. Yeah. I recently saw an interview with Bernie Sanders, and he was definitely talking about how there's just no momentum in the United States for universal basic income, and I'm not really hearing any of it being talked about in the UK either. So instead, Bernie Sanders is mostly promoting the idea of just reducing the work week to 4 days instead of 5 with the same amount of pay. Now, in the abstract, a video game store like Game probably doesn't need to really exist in the UK, as everything just increasingly becomes digital. But yeah, this is definitely bad news for anybody looking for higher employment in the UK. Moving on, I think YouTube retweeted this Nay Tesseract, which yeah, it's this caught my idea as far as I used to work in the medical field in pathology where we dissected human organs for cancer, did autopsies on newborn babies, adults, and many surgical procedures in or for children with cancer. It's definitely way different than most who came into the tech, let's see, space. I left my job to follow my passion for creativity in the PC niche. I'm always here to support women in STEM. So she's apparently some kind of YouTuber or PC builder I was gonna check out. I'm not sure I should be mentioning her at all because there might be major controversies around that. Or yeah, and certainly that doesn't seem like that is a fun medical field. There's a lot of people that also are just morgue assistants. I've heard at least that you don't really have to do a lot of schooling to be a morgue assistant, and you can work in the medical field under the one licensed coroner, and still really you're just cutting up bodies. Sounds like she was probably more educated than that and more qualified than that, though, if she was doing actual diagnostic pathology procedures. But also sounds like that's not a fun field to be cutting up organs looking for cancer, particularly in children. Moving on back to video games that really had nothing to do with video games. It loosely was affiliated with PC building, which PC gaming is loosely affiliated with. Video Games Chronicle says Disney has added Blizzard and Ubisoft veterans to its games leadership team. Game boss Sean Shoptaw has also been promoted. So it does feel like Disney is moving further down the direction of actually trying once again to get into video games. It makes very little sense that Disney has failed so terribly, gotten in and out with video games in the past decade or two, when they really should have had a foothold in games and just always been existent there, either always licensing their products or actually being a publisher and developing their own products. It is crazy on one end that Disney doesn't really feel like it has any animated movies coming out on a consistent basis. Like, we are in the summer season, there should be some kind of Disney movie, but I can't think of anything. So if that's not the case, they should be further promoting their old products and making games based on that. Disney Dreamlight is the most recent Disney game, and then yes, they now own Lucasfilm, but they've not done particularly well with the Lucasfilm properties, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Yes, they own Marvel, but there's dwindling interest in Marvel. Yes, they own ESPN, but unless they're going to have sports games with the ESPN banner, they've not done anything around that. That's not a terrible thought, frankly. Disney definitely has enough money to hire out some companies to constantly make an ESPN football, basketball, soccer games and compete on those levels. But yeah, it seems like it is still very much early days as far as what Disney is trying to do once again with its products, most of which is just putting Disney characters into Fortnite at the moment is all they've really talked about. And then getting former Blizzard employees and former Ubisoft employees probably doesn't mean too much. Let's see if we can get actual names. Ray Gresco, former chief development of World of Warcraft studio Blizzard. And then, let's see, Bjorn Tornquist as vice president of technology. Spent 20 years as the technical leadership roles at Ubisoft and its Swedish studio Massive. So, you know, it almost feels like sometimes when these press releases and news stories come out, they intentionally hire two people of somewhat similar level of celebrity. So it isn't a case that there is a single press release that celebrates just one person being hired. But I imagine a lot of that is just decisions get made in the same meetings at the same time. So, yeah. But yeah, I could see it being standard issue to never put out a press release if you're just hiring one person. If I had a company and I hired Gabe Newell, I definitely would put out a press release going, "We've hired Gabe Newell," and try and use that celebrity alone. But then if Gabe Newell said something offensive and got canceled, then you have that problem too. Inherently, capitalism and corporations are in part in the business of exalting the corporation and doing their best to downplay / dehumanize individual people and their inputs. Look at Marvel and DC Comics history. That has been their playbook in the extremely long case where every single animator, writer, inker, pinner in comic books has been downplayed in favor of a brand of Marvel, which isn't even that good of a brand. Frankly, DC is not much better. Arguably, I might say that the brand overall for Marvel is actually better in the long run, more successful. I don't want to get into Marvel versus DC arguments though. But yeah, it's all about the brands and not about individual writers, individual animators. And fortunately, comic book fans are nervous enough to actually get around that. So most comic book fans do usually know who the animator is, who the writer is, or at least who they're claiming the animator and the writers are. And that leads to deeper appreciation of the artistic creation of those individuals. Moving on with video game news. Balercho's first major update tweaks difficulty and adds new Joker types. Update 1.0.1 is available now for testing on PC. So, for a card game, it probably is going to be helpful for them to try their best to keep the fan base playing. But eventually, particularly for a card game, I think it is going to probably go very silent, and you'll get a version maybe 1.1, 1.2, maybe even up to 1.5, and then I wouldn't be surprised if it's 6 months to a year before you get any other updates, and then you might get a 2.0, or at that point it might make a lot more sense just to make sequel to the game. For a card game, even tweaking the difficulty and changing the gameplay style might be irritating. That's something the Binding of Isaac actually got away with particularly great, is that there's very little desire to go back and play the original versions of the Binding of Isaac, the Flash-based version of the game with no DLC characters and DLC content in it. Every update has been, for the most part, really well accepted, even though it is drastically expanding and changing what the game is, adding more levels, adding a lot more items, adding more challenges. For a card game, though, the way you would change things would be very different from the way Binding of Isaac went about changing things. your early first couple hours of playing Binding of Isaac are not much different from what they originally were. You don't start unlocking content until you win several times. Moving on, there is a report here from GameDeveloper.com that the Xbox executive Kareem Chowdhury is departing after a 26-year tenure. With Chowdhury's exit, Xbox's leadership may prepare for change in leadership ahead of launching its next major console. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Phil Spencer not be in charge. Or I also wouldn't be surprised, since Phil Spencer hasn't been in charge that long, if he stays, but there's now just some ripples of Phil Spencer being in charge instead of Larry Herb, Major Nelson being in charge, since he's no longer with the company. Chowdhury is best known for operating as Xbox's corporate VP along with Project xCloud. He was key to backwards compatibility efforts. Whoops, maybe we're gonna see a new console that's not backward compatibility. I think that'd be kind of crazy. And he famously promised that the Xbox Series X would eat monsters for breakfast. Eat monsters, read the Xbox One X for breakfast. I don't understand what the red in parentheses means here. Eat monsters, Xbox One X for breakfast, that the Series X would be way more powerful than the One X? Or was this supposed to say Xbox One X would eat monsters for breakfast? That's not much of... That's obviously not famous to me enough to feel like that's extra information. I thought this was a female. Kareem. No, I guess Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is male. I guess I was reading this probably as Karen more than Kareem. Suffice it to say, I've never heard of this guy, and it doesn't seem like he's done too much. It would be terrible, though, if all of a sudden he leaves and then backward compatibility efforts go away. But I doubt you could sell an Xbox. Inherently, Xbox has got to rethink what kind of hardware, if any, they are selling, because they are slipping further and further away from the top two in Sony and Nintendo. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says that the number of Japanese arcades has declined by 8,000 in 10 years. New study suggests a spike in bankruptcies in the past year. I'm not sure any of the Sega arcades are still around. The COVID pandemic inherently made it broke a lot of people of the habit of going to arcades and just going out in general. Now they're saying arcades, but I wonder how many of these are also pachinko parlors, which pachinko parlors are closer to casinos than they are arcades, as you would think of them in the West. There are people there that are smoking, and the pachinko is effectively gambling, even though gambling is technically illegal in Japan. Yeah. In 2022, Sega's iconic arcade branding disappeared from Tokyo after the company officially ended its 50-year association with Japan's game centers. So the game centers themselves might have been, might still be around. I have seen a little bit of evidence, and maybe I'm wrong about this, that you're seeing smaller pachinko parlors and smaller arcades that are basically a 10 by 10 foot room, and there's 2 rows of arcade machines and maybe 10 arcade machines in that floor of a building, because a lot of the buildings that in Japan have these multi-floor concepts where there's one business on one floor and then there's a different business on the other floor, and sometimes the different businesses cooperate in weird ways where the checkout person on the first floor may very well run sales for every floor above them. There's also some weirdness in like figure collecting and reselling, in that you can, in some stores, make anime figures and rent out a box and put the animated figures for sale after you've bought them, had them for a certain amount of time, or painted them. Model kits being put together from a set and then being painted, and then you're renting out this box and other people are going and buying second hand the figures, and then the store is just collecting all the money, probably taking a cut and then paying out the person who rented out the box. I'm not sure that they are really paying a rent on it, but they're getting a box, which that is a weird, almost pawn shop variant that you wouldn't see in the West, where you'd have walls and walls of cubes of objects available for sale, but it was all being sold by some kind of estate agent or something. Although there is some stores that are like that in the West, and junk stores and antique stores sometimes work that way. Flea markets kind of work that way. But generally in flea markets you still have to run your own booth and handle all the sales. Anyways, I'm rambling here and started way too late today to be rambling. Yeah, I suspect arcades are dying in Japan. It's probably better for the gaming industry overall. It's a sad thing to say, but inherently, regardless where the arcade is, when Sega makes a unique arcade machine that can only be played in arcades, they're making a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 units that the vast majority of gamers are just never going to be at that arcade and be able to play it. This is a problem with like pinball tables too, is that as much as you might be a fan of pinball, and I certainly am, you would have to go on a vacation across the country and across the world to play certain pinball tables. The newest ones, pretty easy to find, but yeah, if you want to find certain ones, you're going to have to go into the pinball database that they have of where those machines are and what shape and condition and how playable they might be at the moment. And what that eventually has boiled down to is that the vast majority of pinball tables these days are not in arcades' hands. They are in the individual's hands, and they're getting swapped around and played just by those individuals. It becomes far too elitist for its own good. Yeah. And I imagine kids these days just don't really care about arcades. Anyways, they probably are more interested in just online games and mobile games. And I'll leave it at that. Apparently 2 upcoming PlayStation Plus classics have been leaked: Medieval and Star Wars Rebel Assault 2 Hidden Empire. We'll see if that turns out to be true. This is an interesting thing, and it really highlights something that Amazon Prime should have been doing from day one as soon as they acquired Twitch. The first episode of Amazon's Fallout show is going to be viewable on Twitch the whole season. It's Prime Video on Thursday. Clearly Amazon wants to maintain people paying the very high price at this point for Prime, for Amazon Prime and Prime Video, when you could solve a major problem. It might cost you more money and make you less profit in the short run, but you could certainly solve a major problem if you had bought Twitch. And then as soon as you started to see the major problems with Twitch, the metas and the Twitch thoughts and the hot tub streams and all that nonsense, and Dr. Disrespect, all that, every little controversy, as soon as you started to see the first few of those, why not turn Twitch into being at least 50% the place where you go to stream new content from Amazon Prime Video, or at least see a little bit of this? You could at the very least have a promoted Twitch channel that is just like a scheduled TV channel, appointment television, effectively running episodes from Twitch or Freemium. Inherently they have Freemium, so why is Freemium not integrated into Twitch, where instead of having the terrible branding of Freemium, you can be watching on Twitch TV channels with advertisements, free ad-supported television on demand. But yeah, they're only really thinking about it now because they're trying to promote a video game spin-off or licensed TV show. And yeah, I really can only get so hyped around this Fallout TV show. I just really can't personally think of what would have to happen to make me even that interested. Particularly since I have Fallout 4 and I've never played Fallout 4. So if I was going to be interested in playing Fallout or doing anything Fallout, I should play Fallout 4. I shouldn't watch a TV show. But maybe watching the TV show would convince me to play Fallout 4. There was another small controversy on Reddit that I don't think went anywhere, where they showed a screenshot of the Brotherhood of Steel with a clergy looking type character. The poster was saying that they got it all wrong because the Brotherhood of Steel was not Christian based, and then a lot of people commented back, but they are monastic in that they have named a lot of their classes as paladins and knights and things like that. So it would make a lot of sense for there to be a bishop in the Brotherhood of Steel. So yeah, it was very much a non-controversy, and very possibly just advertisements being hidden as a poster of trying to point out something. I don't know if anybody is really that big of a fan of Fallout that if they drastically changed it in the TV show, anybody would really care. The games aren't getting deleted or going anywhere. Moving on, the GameDeveloper.com says Palia, their developers, Singularity 6, is laying off 35% of its workforce. Which, yeah, we've seen a somewhat slowdown in layoff announcements now that we are approaching the second quarter. Yeah, we are, I guess technically April 8th would be the second quarter, so there's less urgency now to lay off people at the beginning of the year, and we'll still probably see layoffs throughout the rest of 2024, but it typically becomes a case where you even get some hirings happening in the last quarter, although a lot of those hirings are trying to get desperate people at low pay or trying to get temporary employees who you're not keeping for more than 30 days or 90 days, whatever. You're not keeping them much longer past January 1st of the next year. Let's see, Yuji Naka, I thought he had pretty much disappeared. But yeah, like he was the co-creator of Sonic, which I'm not sure that really means that much. He is currently serving a 30-month suspended sentence for insider trading, which basically means that if he just keeps his nose clean and doesn't commit any other crimes, he won't actually go to jail. So it is basically like parole. Although I'm not sure what the real difference between being on parole in Japanese law or even in Western United States law is compared to having a 30-month suspended sentence. I think parole probably just means if you don't get a job, which it's crazy that you're required to get a job after you've already served your time for committing a crime, they'll throw you back in jail and they're add on to your sentence, where I imagine the suspended sentence starts with you have 30 months, and for every month you don't commit a crime, you're reducing that 30 months down to 0. But if you did commit a crime, then you have to go to jail for that amount of time, and then you'd be put on parole, and then you'd have to follow the conditions of the parole, which is often don't associate with other criminals, don't commit any other crimes, obviously, and be gainfully employed. Which, yeah, that is in part capitalism showing its head, certainly, that you cannot be effectively retired or independently wealthy and be on parole. That you have to enter the system of being exploited by somebody else. You can't probably be a independent contractor, or maybe you could be an independent contractor, but I wouldn't be surprised if most paroles say you have to be employed by somebody else, which definitely doesn't work in the United States for convicted felons. Anyways, that has nothing really to do with video game news, but yeah, I thought he had just disappeared for insider trading, and apparently he has now returned to X to accuse the Dragon Quest producer of lying to the court, which, unless he was going to file some kind of actual legal paperwork, which would have been the real move there, him coming out and saying this just feels like slander. Now, it's important to point out that he was sentenced to 30 months in prison, suspended for 4 years, and given 2 fines of $1.2 million US dollars, and he pled guilty. And by my fuzzy recollection of it, it definitely felt like he was guilty. But it is also important to always point out in Japanese law that they have like a 93% conviction rate, and the vast majority of even innocent people in Japan just plead guilty. It's not much better in the United States. They want to get you convicted on something regardless. So yeah, it's often not worth it to fight for like years and years and years, and maybe more than $1.2 million just to prove that you're innocent, even if you are innocent. Let's see. Apparently he returned to Twitter to comment on news that the Dragon Quest producer Miyake would reportedly be reassigned. Miyake is created as the executive officer for Naka's Square Enix title Balan Wonderworld, which was a major failure. In an X post, Naka alleged that Miyake lied in court documents, presumably part of his insider trading trial. Which, yeah. I think I'll just leave the rest of the story at that, because this definitely feels like this is just messy, and definitely feels like it's not going to be helpful for the gaming community to follow this kind of drama. We don't need any drama llamas, as it were, in video games. We already have way too many. Although the vast majority of the drama we do see in video games is just an Anita Sarkeesian type person who is claiming video games are sexist or something. We typically don't have a lot of cases where one game developer is throwing shade at another game developer. In this one, getting into actual convictions is a uniquely messy situation. But yeah, check out Video Games Chronicle if you're interested in the full story. YouTube Creators is still doing this video style championship, and even though they have the double brackets here on the side, it definitely seems like they are just doing YouTube polls and one side of the brackets. And weirdly, Let's Play beat out vlogs. So with that momentum, there is a real possibility that Let's Plays amongst Twitter people voting in Twitter polls, which is a very small and probably inconsistent selection amongst people actually following YouTube creators, which is mostly just YouTube creators, which would, by the vast majority of people, be Let's Players. But yeah, it looks like Let's Play might win. It would be kind of hard to believe how-tos somehow beat out Let's Plays. If anything, this may highlight where previous metas have died out as far as reaction channels and unboxing channels. Challenge channels have been algorithmically gotten rid of. I never figured out what GRWM shorts stood for, and then sit downs and vlogs. I don't even know what the difference is there either. But yeah, I doubt this is going to change, though, any plans for YouTube at all if Let's Plays win. It would be nice if there was more assistance on Let's Plays to get more people watching them. I've realized here that Cracking the Cryptic as a YouTube channel is incredibly popular, specifically because they are doing a trick where they have a link to the Sudoku puzzle they're doing in that video, and then that encourages people to click on the link, and if you have the audio playing in the background, which depends on how you have your YouTube account set up, if you're paying for YouTube Premium, or if you can do it sometimes for some videos and you can't do it for other videos. A lot of times you can't do it for music videos unless you have YouTube Premium. But yeah, they're getting a large amount of watch time as they spend 20 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes solving each Sudoku puzzle, because people are, myself included, trying to solve this Sudoku puzzle themselves and just letting the audio play in the background, which is definitely what I've been doing, and it is just a natural flow. So as a YouTube content creator, there's a trick here. If I could figure out a way to link to something that would keep people's attention and just have me playing in the background, that would be very helpful, certainly. I'm not sure what I can link to per se, though. Nobody's going to link to a Steam game and then start playing the Steam game and then have me on in the background. Not likely anyways. So this might really be more of an exclusive trick to Cracking the Cryptic, and the fact that there are links to Sudoku Pad to solve Sudokus. It might make sense just to have a link to a Sudoku puzzle in the description of every other game I'm playing, just to keep people playing the audio in the background. Anyways, there was this total eclipse that happened today. I saw it on TV. I wasn't going to even do that much. I was just going to stream, but I obviously had an emergency and things changed there. It's not much of anything at all, frankly, to see on TV. I think it probably is much more interesting to be outside and looking at the eclipse. There's not going to be another one that's a total eclipse for like 20 years in the United States, but there will be others elsewhere around the world. It did occur to me that it would have been a great time to have a block party and a barbecue type event. Just invite all your friends and neighbors to be outside and having a party. I'm not sure that there really were that many people cooking or barbecuing though, because then you'd have to put out the fire as before the eclipse happened. It would make a lot more sense to not start cooking, not start any fires until after the eclipse. But as far as video game related, it didn't have much to do anything. ScumVM announced that they are playtesting for the game Total Eclipse, a 1988 classic, which I've never heard of. There's probably a lot of those. There is a new ScumVM release on March 31st, and they're testing for a game called Orion Burger. Increasingly, with new versions of ScumVM, they're covering more and more lesser known games, which weirdly is probably the way to play new point and click adventures at this point, because it's not like people are making good, interesting new point and click adventures. This definitely looks like an older visual style, CGA style graphics. Yep, really low res. Also, not probably as much of a point and click game. I have this vague memory when I was younger of playing some kind of video game that in my mind looked amazing when I was in first grade or kindergarten, which would have been so long ago that the graphics literally must have been something like this. Even if I'm not even sure I was playing a PC game. I may very well have just been playing some weird console Laserdisc VHS game, and maybe then the graphics would have been that good. But frankly, I'm not sure I didn't dream up the whole thing. I've never been able to find out what that game was. I'm probably not remembering it correctly. It was a game where you were Prince of Persia style platforming around a cave. But it honestly would have been probably years before Prince of Persia even had come out. So, but anyways, my point here is I see games like this, and this is almost certainly the level of detail that games I would have been playing as a very young kid would have been. 1988. Yeah. This would be the level of graphics of roughly around the time when I was in first grade. Apple has lifted the App Store ban on game emulators. Developers will be responsible for ensuring games are legal. Apparently Apple had a blanket ban. This may be a move on Apple's case to try to be more into video games and probably less into their effort on Apple Arcade, because I really haven't seen anything new being released or talked about for Apple Arcade in a very long time. But yeah, as far as I understand it, the vast majority of kids these days have iPhones. They've grown up on iPhones. We haven't seen anything that indicates that there would be a shift for a new generation to be on Android phones or some other kind of phones. So gaming should be much more prominent and successful on Apple than it has been. And I imagine some of this may literally just be Apple seeing that eventually they're going to have to let Fortnite back on to the iPhone, so they're trying anything they can think of to make other games more palatable and more interesting to people. And then apparently Xbox is reportedly planning Gears and Call of Duty reveals at its summer event. According to Video Games Chronicle, that's June 9th. So that's a bit of a time away. Alright, let's go through all the games that came out on the last stream that I might want to actually make YouTube shorts on. There's a decent amount here of things that got actual press releases, and then there's more things here. This looks animated well enough. This is English only as a visual novel. It is really shocking that we've had this revitalization of the idea of AI generated content, and yet there has been a plateau probably for a decade as far as text to speech goes. Like, whatever the Alexa level of development as far as text to speech has been the plateau for a while. They're not getting any better at making different voices or voices that sound more human. I'm not even sure in the case of Alexa they really are trying to make the voices sound more human. So if you were going to go down the route of trying to take a visual novel like this and making it an audio, an accessible audio novel as a concept too, where you could flip an option and then it would voice act all of these characters, which there is no full audio in this game, so there isn't voice acting. That would be the technology that would be way more helpful for video games than AI generating images or AI generating audio. I did hear some news reports around a new audio AI generated product that, from people's opinion, I don't really personally know anything about audio to make an opinion myself around it. It seems like the AI audio was doing a pretty poor job of making songs, little snippets, 2-3 minute songs. But their target market would be, do you want some AI generated copyright free just backing music for a waiting room, for a grocery store? Like, if all of a sudden you just heard a bunch of songs that sound like something that you might have heard before but you can't really place in a lot of places, like a waiting room or grocery store or an elevator, and then that created a situation where the grocery stores don't have to pay license to the audio, they would definitely take this. I almost want to say yes to this, but this definitely feels like this is just a mobile game. One punch or be defeated. I'm falling for the cat girl here, obviously. Yeah, and there's multiple currencies here. Is there in-app purchases? Doesn't seem like it. Yeah, there is. Yeah, I can't say yes to that. Seeing increasingly family sharing makes more sense now than ever before. Unfortunately, I don't have anyone to really experiment with family sharing to see how that really would work. Like, theoretically, this is from a famous person. This is a very old NES well, visual novel. It's very famous in Japan, easily dismissed if you don't know anything about it. Build cities in Earth orbit. I'll give it a chance. I've done nothing as far as faultless cleanup though. I need to figure out a way to do that. Part of that, in part, is because my macro's been broken. This looks like this is Hanafuda games. They're calling it Go Stop. Depending on what you're playing with Hanafuda, go and stop are phrases. Nope, they're calling it the Korean game Go Stop. So Hanafuda cards, to my understanding, were originally Japanese, but I know the Koreans also sometimes play with them. Hanafuda cards are really small compared to Western playing cards. And that's definitely what they're showing here. But Go Stop is probably a different variant of what you would be playing. And it being in VR really doesn't make any sense at all to me. Not every single board game or tabletop game needs to be in VR. And if they do, they all need to be in a VR tabletop simulator. Increasingly, we're seeing games like this where objects are getting dropped down and getting merged together. And I have no interest in really promoting those because they're all just the same concept over and over again. It definitely would be easier for a content creator if there was voice acting, even text-to-speech voice acting, in every single visual novel. But it still creates a weird situation where, particularly trying to cover visual novels that are linear, is just not fair use. Or it's extremely hard to make it fair use, because everything is just linearly happening. If you have voice acting going on, then you're going to talk less. You really need some kind of mysteries or puzzles to talk through if you're going to do something like that. And yeah, visual novel creators in particular are not happy with the idea that people can make YouTube videos and they would just spoil everything. Here's an interesting question. Should we highlight a Worms game that is not actually Worms and is instead Wizards? I think the answer to that is yes. It's not like there's a massive amount of clones of Worms games, or even any interesting Worms games. Now, if we did have AI voice text-to-speech generated, you probably would see things closer to this to start off with, is something that is just a wall of text and just an interactive text-based fiction, and not even falling under the category of tagging itself as a visual novel. This looks awful. Give that a chance. We've seen crime scene cleanup, and we now see a dungeon renovation simulator game. Some of these have already been on the fall list. Should probably be paying more attention to their reviews at this point. Although, in fairness, if they just got released, that is not really interesting. One of the things I guess I can say, interesting, I don't know if this is yet another game. I've seen a game like this before. So I don't know if this is a sequel or... Let's see, YIIK 1.5 or I.V. Bold new reimagining and expansion of YIIK, a postmodern RPG. Yeah, this is mostly positive game here. So this is technically a prologue. I guess I just I've not been promoting prologues, and I still don't think I want to promote prologues. Anyways, I started to say, one of the things I've seen with the Steam Deck is that there is, at least in KD Plasma version 6, a upgraded version of a screen capture, video capture app. So eventually I think I probably will, just even as a small experiment, make videos on my Steam Deck, probably showing off tricks and tweaks. And so I probably will see if it makes some sense to just use a screen capture app instead of trying to use OBS. Again, that would be an app that's installed by default and really not easily uninstallable, instead of taking up extra space to have OBS installed. Of course, there's a lot more tricks you could do with OBS, almost certainly, but I don't know if the Steam Deck is really that powerful anyways to be doing tricks. It may very well be a case where I may just record footage and then annotate and talk over the playback of footage later on in my main computer. I'm still very much thinking about how that would go, though, because a lot of the tips and tricks are going to straight up be this one says I'm not signed in. A lot of the tips and tricks are going to be script and text based. I kind of want this to be good, but I'm pretty sure this is just a forever platforming game. Nor one arise. So here's your typical trailer, garbage trailer game where you have a character just doing the running animation, jumping. Yep, and it is thematically more consistent, it looks like, as far as what random garbage are you jumping on that's floating in the air. They never really try to explain why things are floating in the air. Yeah. This parkour platforming concept used to be hopper maps in Minecraft, and Minecraft obviously is losing some appeal, and now you're just seeing asset flip parkour games like that. And there's just kind of no way it won't be an asset flip game, because the main main idea is to have as much variety in objects, and the only way you could do that is by asset flipping. I guess you could try to make a game that was just very consistent and had very repetitive platforms that you're jumping to. We've seen that the meme of making terrible backrooms games has now merged pretty consistently with people ripping off the Exit, or Exit 8, I believe was the actual name of the horror game there it was a little bit more of a game. Yeah. I would definitely have to experiment to see just how long the screen capture can capture, and if it can do it when playing games, or if all of a sudden that just doesn't work. That is definitely a element of the Steam Deck, is that I may kind of quickly realize that even if it can play games, it can't capture footage at the same time. And yeah, it would be then a matter of maybe $50 to put in a video capture card into my computer and get a long USB-C to HDMI adapter. This Withering Rooms game is being rated very positively, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on the wish list. Is my kind of weird games. We haven't seen a lot of weird games lately. Suppose it's worth pointing out that at any point there could be more emergencies, so maybe I won't stream on Wednesday. I'm thinking about tomorrow, which, yeah, probably won't accomplish much. I really have, and was really just planning on not doing anything for at least a couple of weeks, and it still seems like that may very well be what happens. But there is certainly a timer that if things go well in the end of this week, I might start to just play Hand of Fate 2 and just make more content. I definitely need to schedule content. I'm increasingly recognizing that there are episodes airing on my channel right now, and my channel inherently on YouTube is doing very well. I'm teetering on 800 subscribers. I think I'm at like 799. I might very well be at 800 now, just by the end of this stream. That is still 200 short of the 1,000 subscribers requirement, and frankly probably about 300 short of where you want to comfortably be, because I suspect as soon as they start to really evaluate your channel to be monetized, they're going to toss out 100 subscribers in general and just say those were all bot accounts. And yeah, I'm still only a quarter away from the watch time, so unless I can get the watch time to quadruple. Here we have a Japanese only visual novel. It's been a while since we've seen a Japanese looking game, although weirdly I said this was a visual novel, but let's go ahead and translate it because it doesn't seem to me like it actually is any kind of game like this. Multi-ending adventure game. The three heroines are fully voiced. A sudden tragedy on a peaceful island. One day the entire island suddenly becomes full of zombies. It says it's a simulation dating cute first-person shooter. And then you have a screenshot here of what looks like a low-effort platformer. And then you have anime girls art, which I suspect might not be properly licensed. And then you have a zombie character. But then you have 3D zombie first-person shooter. This feels like this is a rare occasion, really, of a Japanese garbage game, asset flip game, possibly not properly licensed game. But yeah, weirdly, I haven't really seen the moe or kawaii art styles. This would probably be slightly more kawaii in visual novels lately. And I'm not 100% willing to just say, oh, Valve is about back to soft censoring games and they're not approving visual novels. It may very well just be a case that Japanese publishers are not really publishing games right now. They might be in a certain point where they're taking more time off, or where they know games aren't typically going to be very good in sales. I want to play something called Uber Soldier. If this was an old game, I might consider it. But I don't think it really is. I'll put it on the follow list, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it just because of the Nazi elements there. Katana Arena is probably nothing. And we have a tower defense game. One of the things about the next version of the Steam OS, I imagine, assuming it does use KDE Plasma version 6, is that when Windows start to get dragged downward towards the start menu, the taskbar, yeah, it's called the taskbar. The start menu is just the part on the left. The taskbar will auto hide it and auto dodge the window, which is the kind of optimizations that will be particularly helpful at the 1280 by 800 resolution that the Steam Deck maxes out on, at least on its touchscreen. Maybe it can do higher resolutions elsewhere if you have an external screen. Let's see. So yeah, there definitely are a lot of tweaks that the next version of KDE Plasma could have uniquely for Steam Deck, and the next version of SteamOS could have uniquely for Steam Deck. SteamOS would have the unique things for the Steam Deck. Let's see. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. Like that first day one experience on the desktop mode on SteamOS 3.0 or whatever version is currently the version is very, very rough. Now, weirdly, I've barely played any games on my Steam. I really haven't played any games on my Steam Deck, so I really can't say too much as far as the gaming mode that needs improvement. Although I would say there is probably room for improvement there. Also, perhaps a smaller icon mode, and more of a shift away from the idea of a big screen mode, because taking a kind of Steam Deck mode and basing it off big screen mode is a little illogical, because the Steam Deck is a low resolution small 7 point something screen, the OLED is at least, which means sharp smaller icons with sharp text makes a little bit more sense than tall images that would be in big screen mode on a TV that might be 32 inch to 77, 100 inch, whatever. I saw Slick Deals for a 77 inch. It was $1,800 still, though. That's way too expensive. anyways, let's try and wrap up here since we started late. Here we have the SteamDB 24-hour peak. Let's see if we're seeing anything particularly interesting. Helldivers 2 is in number 6 spot and seems to be doing particularly well. I'm not sure there's any single player action in Helldivers 2 though, unfortunately, so I'm probably never going to play it, which probably is true for Helldivers 1 also. But that is where you get the big 24-hour peak, is by having online requirements and having a lot of people have to play. I'm not sure they ever really got their servers higher though. Like, it kind of feels like Helldivers, even though they're in the peak at the moment, would fall down very quickly if 2 or 3 times as many people wanted to play and then they hit a maximum server case. Like, I don't expect Helldivers to ever have an all-time peak of nearly 2 million. And then, is there anything else to really talk about? Palworld's in 14th spot. It did have a peak of 2 million, but it notably is barely over 100,000 players. It's always the question though, do you really need to, in any 24-hour period, if you have a single player game, actually have large numbers of players? That is certainly the question. And you have games like The Sims 4 that have just been around forever, so them having consistently 30,000-40,000 players might work. Although maybe not if you're not monetizing the players who are just continuously playing a game. Yeah. Overwatch 2 is way down here in the 40th spot. And I guess I'll mostly leave it at that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duels in the 56th spot. And then my chart, which is probably not very helpful or accurate. I say this almost every stream now. I probably shouldn't be so negative. Shows Apex Legends still trending downward, Naraka Blade Point trending downward, and for the most part everybody trending downward with the exception of Palworld, which is bouncing back up. But Palworld on 313 was at 126,000 versus 120 most recently. And then Palworld, it was at like 200,000 and then spiked very highly. Let's see, 499,000 on 216, launched on 119. Now this blue here is Apex Legends, and so it's too many colors because Apex Legends is crossing over with this blue line for Palworld. Oh yeah, if we wanted to highlight that, you could click that and that would highlight Palworld launching and then skyrocketing very high and then falling down, 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 now at a much lower number. But yeah, the overall trend still seems to be that things are still kind of slow as far as gaming goes, as far as people playing games, 24-hour peaks. And there's still no real talk of a Steam summer sale, which I guess at this point, if there was a Steam summer sale and Steam Decks were on sale, I would imagine it would be refurbished units of the Callisto Protocols on sale, but it's still mixed reviewed. Yeah, I'd assume it would be Steam Decks that are the lowest versions and refurbished units, and I don't think I'd be particularly upset about those being on sale. If anything, I might just buy a couple more Steam Decks for friends and family. there is a crossover point where right now I'm trying to make a good starter build of what the Steam Deck should be out of the box. But then even now I've got like emails logged in and things like that, so I'm gonna have to spend some time doing a cleanup too. And then the new and trending according to Steam's front page is Spirit City Lo-Fi Sessions. Interesting. Is this really a game of any sort? It seems like it might be. Open that. And then Withering Room doing particularly well. We're seeing more darker imagery at the moment. And top sellers is Steam Deck and Helldivers. On the other hand, if there is no Steam Deck on sale during the summer sale, I'm then just going to hope that there isn't anything else that occurs that would potentially be something I would want to buy, because yeah, I've definitely blown the budget on buying any video games. And next time I do get around to buying video games, I probably need to research very well as far as just how Steam Deck compatible those games are as a consideration. And that may not be particularly easy to do when shopping. Alright, so I did fix my clips macro in UI Vision, which is a version of it's a Chrome Firefox extension that uses Selenium as a macro maker to run in websites. But anyways, it sometimes executes in a sandbox mode JavaScript. And what I had done is to call a variable in UI Vision, you put $, curly brackets open, the name of the variable, and then curly brackets closed. And in JavaScript, you don't do any of that. You just type in the name of the variable. You define the variable with the let command nowadays. So you'll say let variable 1 equals something, and then you just type variable 1. So my macro was doing the other thing that it shouldn't have been doing, and that's why it wasn't working. I must have written the code just on top of my head and then never really tested it because it was only a small amount of code, 3 or 4 lines, and it was giving me trouble because I was not recognizing that I was using the wrong programming language, which that's a problem certainly when you have 2 different ways to do something in a programming language, and only one of them is the right way at any specific point. But though, to make that long story short, clips did happen today. I'm still not sure clips happen at all. I am reconsidering how I'm going to do chapters if I ever get around to doing chapters. I think chapters are the smarter move in the long run, and I think to make room, I may just in the live streams get rid of the description of the game, in this case Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, in favor of just having a longer wall of chapters show up. Just instead have a link to the game and get rid of descriptions. That'll probably save me a lot of characters. Then I could potentially undo the work I've already done to try and shorten chapters into like ... short sentences that don't finish themselves, much like how I often start an idea and don't finish it. Anyways, let's do headlines. We already started late, no reason to go later. Activision says it banned 27,000 Call of Duty accounts over the weekend. Disney adds Blizzard and Ubisoft veterans to its games leadership team. Forza Motorsport update adds Brands Hatch and reduces the game file size. I assume Brands Hatch is a circuit. I've never heard of it, but it seems like that's what it is. A series of tracks, or maybe just one track. UK retailer Game is reportedly making layoffs. Pokemon EUIC 2024 winners crowned in London. The first episode of Amazon's Fallout show will be viewable on Twitch. Helldivers 2 sales outpacing Spider-Man 2 in the UK. Now, the first episode of Fallout being available on Twitch really is not far enough. It should be that all the episodes will be available on Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, first episode's free. If you don't have Amazon Prime, like, the two products really should be merged into one. And I could definitely see getting the best of both worlds from two mediocre products, in that case Twitch and Amazon Prime Video and Freemium. I could see having one UI, one combined thing, convincing people who would never watch game streaming to go to Twitch. Although inherently you gotta clean up Twitch first, otherwise Amazon really can't do too much there. So you'd have to kick out all the Twitch thoughts to begin with. Last thing you want is somebody watching NCIS, some old grandfather watching NCIS on Twitch, and then being given an ad to watch a hot tub streamer. That would cause controversy, to say the least. Two upcoming PlayStation Plus classic titles have seemingly leaked. The number of Japan's arcades has declined by 8,000 in 10 years. Pokemon World Championships 2024 dates have been confirmed. I'm surprised they're still doing all that, but Pokemon is still very popular, so it makes a lot of sense. Yuji Naka returns to X by accusing Dragon Quest producer of lying to the court. Xbox has established a team dedicated to game preservation. Let's see. Sarah Bond also reaffirms Microsoft's commitment to gaming hardware. Inherently, if Xbox and Microsoft has a team dedicated to game preservation, that doesn't mean as much to the rest of the world as it means to Microsoft. Because yes, almost any company could have an internal archive and preserve every single bit of source code or the final products of their games, but that could certainly just be in a vault that at any point they could just set on fire and destroy if they wanted to. Game preservation being in the hands of the same people who are habitually taking games off of sale and making unavailable or manipulating in some other way is not really game preservation. If they are handing over a copy to a museum that would then not hand the copy back to the people, that would at least be a slightly better direction there. And inherently, museums have, I think, a little bit more protection, whereas if a court said that this game cannot be preserved because it includes like copyrighted information that wasn't properly licensed, then Microsoft would have no choice. They wouldn't fight it in court in the first place, but they really would have no choice to destroy something like Too Human is a great example of a game there that legally can't be sold and maybe can't even legally be preserved. Too Human is also, I guess, the prime example of something that should be out there as a ROM on a torrent site, because that's the only way to ensure society as a whole really has access to it. And inherently, what museums are now as buildings that you have to go to see something possibly behind glass needs to be expanded to more digital museums, internet archive type things that potentially should have ROMs of old games that are public domain at least on them. Sarah Bond is perhaps a name to watch. She may be a bigger deal going forward in Xbox. Belartro's first major update tweaks difficulty and adds new Joker types. Xbox is reportedly planning Gears of War and Call of Duty reveals at its summer event. Apple lifts App Store ban on game emulators. And then I think what we're going to do here is probably try not to make any clips, so I'm just going to go quiet because I think we've done all of these stories before. So I'm just going to go quiet and close these tabs, and hopefully that won't trigger any clips being made, since my program is designed to capture when I start going over a certain level of loudness. Okay, so that was awkward silence, to say the least, but it also potentially gives me an excuse to take a breath and take a break there. I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense, though, to slowly close the tabs. It might have made a lot more sense to just close the tabs as fast as possible there. But yeah, that definitely felt like there was some awkward silence that needed to be addressed better there. I'm not seeing a lot of Gamatsu articles, and that may just be because it's Monday. We didn't see a lot of announcements or anything come out, which again may be just because it's Monday, but yeah, let's go through the Gamatsu articles. Ready Steady Ship launches April 19th. Let's see what this is already on my fall list, but it probably didn't have a release date. This is dangerously close to the line of not playing video games that just simulate boring jobs, or simulate jobs in general. Final Formation has been announced for Switch and PC. Looks like some kind of Robotech type game, Transformer type game. No Steam leaks yet. I don't think it actually is associated with any Transformer series. I imagine there were several shows similar to Transformers, and Transformers just became the most popular one. Transformers, as far as TV shows in particular, is also very weird in how up and down those series have been. Yeah, for all the revivals of like Ninja Turtles and other shows recently, Transformers has not even tried to revive itself as a new cartoon as far as I know. And yeah, we're still talking about like the Michael Bay Transformers movies, which went in a different direction than I would have gone if I was going to make a Transformer movie. P-47-2 MD announced unreleased Mega Drive version of a shoot 'em up P-47 the Phantom Fighter. Interesting. Releasing unreleased games years, decades later. FZ Formation Z adds aircraft R9X extra arrow. I'm not sure how much of that is. I guess the aircraft is called the R9X extra arrow. And the game is FZ Formation Z. Looks like a side-scrolling shoot 'em up. Due out at some point in 2024, but they don't even have a Steam link to it. Never Awake DLC flashback announced. So this animation style looks weird here because I must be thinking of a different game. Yeah. Yeah, I must be thinking of a different game. And then what Never Awake looks like in the actual gameplay seems to be a shoot 'em up game, which I'm very surprised by that. It's totally not what I was expecting. Yeah, I'm confusing this with Little Nightmares. I vaguely recall this weird side-scrolling shoot 'em up game. But even the DLC seems to be very visually different, so I don't see a reason to make a YouTube short yet until the DLC actually comes out. But yeah, even here animation looks very different. This girl's asleep and the actual game is side-scrolling or top-down twin-stick shooter. I guess it's a top-down twin-stick shooter, it's just fairly zoomed in. Yeah, this is a vampire. What is it? I want to say Vampire Smiles. That's not the name of it. It's Vampire Survivors clone it by the looks of it. Which that is an interesting idea, certainly, as far as if you make one game and then another game like Vampire Survivors becomes really popular, can you make DLC that plays in a completely different way from what the original game seems to have played as? Although I'm not sure that it really plays that differently. Let's go back and hit play here. See what the main game looks like. This has a very res vibe to it. No, it's pretty much still the same thing. You'd call it a side-scrolling shoot 'em up, but there isn't really too much difference between a side-scrolling shoot 'em up and a Vampire Survivors game, a top-down twin-stick shooter. This is a very weird-looking game, to say the least, but obviously rated very positively and kind of in my wheelhouse as far as games I'd like to play, but also a great example of a game that I'm not getting around to. They're calling it a roguelike shooter now, a roguelite shooter as far as this DLC is concerned. Momorukun Curse is coming to the PS5, Xbox, Switch, and PC in 2025. I would assume this is a visual novel, but I would be wrong. It's actually a shoot 'em up game. 2 shoot 'em ups probably being announced by the same publisher if I was paying attention. Truxton 2, Grindstormer, Doggiyun, and Twin Hawk for PC launch April 8th. More shoot 'em ups. Rustal Eternal Labyrinth Castle launches in early access on April 26th. It's a roguelike action game from Shinden Games. This could be something. Certain. God Wars series sales have topped 400,000. Let's see what the sales and the reviews are as far as Steam. It's pretty mixed and it doesn't look particularly interesting. Now, it just occurred to me with the idea of the Steam Deck, if you can reasonably get footage out of it, increasingly something like Giant Bomb, in that the way they did quick looks, could have been more efficient and could have been easier, certainly, because when Giant Bomb was doing quick looks early on, it was necessary to have a console and a game or a PC in the same room with a couple people in the same room sitting and playing while also talking. If all of a sudden you're just capturing footage and then replaying the footage and then everybody sitting around watching the footage, that could create better commentary, and it certainly could have improved things. And the Steam Deck helps certainly there in that you just have fewer computers and consoles that you have to move around. There's fewer game discs that you would have to move around. But yeah, if I was going to make Giant Bomb win today, if Giant Bomb had never existed before, and I don't know why I'm talking about Giant Bomb since I've stopped watching them for months now, but if I was going to do that, I would definitely have pre-recorded footage and then have everybody sit around and watch the pre-recorded footage during the bombcast and talk over it, or everybody sit around doing quick looks and talk over it, and then in the bombcast maybe you get some clips that you want to highlight at most in the bombcast, but maybe you don't even bother with that because that would just take more time. Although if I was making Giant Bomb today, I would definitely demand clips too. There's a lot of more work that could have been done. Of course, it would have costed a lot more money to make clips and have more editors and things like that. Under Defeat is coming to the PS5, Xbox, Switch, and PC this winter. This looks like yet another shoot 'em up game. Yeah, it's all being published under City Connection. So basically, City Connection put out 3 or 4 press releases, and that was basically on Friday, April 6th. And we already talked about still in Embracer's custody, Gearbox Publishing rebrands to Arc Games. And weirdly, that article's backwards from where it should have been. I've been noticing my tabs have been jumping around. Then we had already talked about Disney adding Blizzard and Marvel Games alums to the executive leadership, and then Kareem Chowdhury departing after 26 years. Let's see. Here's a story that we missed. Let's open that. And we talked about Konami to raise base salary in Japan for a 3rd consecutive years, and then Palia developer Singularity 6 laying off 35% of its workforce. Although a lot of these companies have like less than 100 people, so when you start giving percentages that are less than 100, you're being dishonest with the information. It's or at least inefficient with the information. It would be easier to say and write the actual number than it would be to write 35 and then a percentage sign alone, and notice that they're actually typing in the word percent. So at that case, if you're just talking about scarcity of character space, you have 7, 8 extra spaces here that you're adding, which would mean you would need something a number that would be up to 8 extra zeros at the end of it. Which, yeah, 35 million people being laid off. And even in that case, 35 million would probably be still easier to write if you just type 35 million instead of 35%. But yeah, they like bigger numbers. So 35% of a 10 or 20 person team sounds bigger than saying that 6 people are being laid off, which I'm just picking those numbers out of nowhere. And that's just made up numbers. Is there any other article here from GameDeveloper.com that we haven't covered? I don't think so. DF Retro talking about Ninja Theory and not really saying anything that got me too excited around it yet. I'd like to be excited around it, but I imagine I won't be. Although weirdly, the Hellblade 2 game might actually catch my attention, because one of my main complaints about Hellblade 1 is that there wasn't really a gameplay mechanic in it. If there's a lot more fighting and an actual gameplay mechanic in Hellblade 2, that might work. As far as, but we just have to wait and see. Let's see, this was supposed to be before that, so all of those articles are way before where they should be. And then here we have an obituary for Jeremias Babini, storyteller, co-designer, has passed away. Babini's decades-long career includes original games like Storyteller and Pio Pow, and various Cartoon Network games for Flash and HTML. I don't recognize any of these names. He probably was making very niche games. Pio Pow seems to be a Famicom game or an NES game from the looks of it. This looks like a Ben 10 type Cartoon Network character, and that just looks like a general monster in armor character. This is another example where it makes a lot of sense to just have someone stoically look in the camera and take a picture, just in case, and just doing that every year or so, just in case you need a photograph for a funeral or obituary. Apparently Jeremias Babini passed away unexpectedly over the weekend. He's an Argentinian developer. He made a game in 2023 called Storyteller, which I vaguely recall something called Storyteller, but I couldn't tell you what it was. He was an art director on a number of Cartoon Network titles, Steven Universe, Sword Dancers, and regular show Demonic Nap Time. He worked on Pio Pow for NES and Famicom, whose status currently remains up in the air, so that the game never actually was finished. He was making a new game for Famicom and NES. Like with the Atari 2600, developers have taken to creating new game cartridges for the retro console. Alright, so we'll leave it at that. You can check out GameDeveloper.com if you want to read the full article. And that is going to be the end of this show, which is good because it's late. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.